US President Donald Trump has signed an executive order withdrawing aid to South Africa and offering refuge to South African Afrikaners. At the heart of this decision was President Trump's disapproval of South Africa's land expropriation policies and its legal actions against Israel at the International Court of Justice. The South African government has criticized this move, arguing that it misrepresents the nation's efforts to address historical injustices stemming from colonialism and apartheid. The spat around this executive order has significantly strained US-South Africa relations, with concerns about potential economic repercussions. To weigh in on this issue, I'm joined by Angelo Dube, Acting Director for the School of Law at UNISA. Angelo, welcome to Power Lunch Southern Africa, and thank you for your time.
Thank you.
I think let's start the conversation at the issue of the impact of this land expropriation law. What is your take on how this new law has strained diplomatic relationships between South Africa and the US?
The starting point would have to be, one, looking at the history of land distribution in South Africa, land redistribution and land deprivation, which has led us to where we are now. We are dealing with the Expropriation Act not because we woke up one day and decided let's just take land from people. Land was taken from the original inhabitants of this land by white settlers who took over the land forcefully, using the powers that they had, the laws that they had at the time, to deprive black people of access to land. Fast forward to a democratic South Africa, we're then reversing the ill-gotten gains of that unlawful taking over of land by ensuring that there's a framework in place that allows the state to take over land and redistribute in order to correct past injustices. This is constitutional. Our constitution allows for that to happen. It's what the democracy that we formed ourselves into in 1994 has produced, a constitution respected across the world. And from that constitution, a parliament was set up, which then made the laws which are now at the center of this discussion, such as the Expropriation Act.
Do you think the issue between the Trump and South Africa now is primarily about the land expropriation policy, or do you think it's maybe more about South Africa's genocide case against Israel at the ICJ, given that Israel is a key US ally?
When you're dealing with a man like Trump, you're dealing with a very volatile individual that's not stable at all. He will weaponize international relations. He will weaponize international law. He will weaponize the economic standing of the US, and he has done so in the South Africa case. It becomes clear that we're fighting a proxy war here. The issue is not about the expropriation of land, because anyone who cares to read would understand that that is not the case. Trump would weaponize anything. He did the same in his first entry into power when he arrested a Chinese national who was transiting through Canada. That was an executive for Huawei. In his fight with China, he's doing the same now with us. So because we have taken a stance to stand with Ubuntu, to stand with human rights in the genocide case, in the South Africa versus Israel case, we are being punished for standing for carrying out our obligations as a country. Because in the Israeli case, we were simply carrying out our obligations as South Africa. We have obligations under international law to protect the sanctity of the treaties that we're part of, such as the Genocide Convention. So Trump is now weaponizing his resources in order to punish South Africa for a non-existent claim. That is the persecution of white people. It does not exist. It only exists in the head of Trump, the head of Elon Musk, and the head of those fellas from AfriForum.
I'm glad you touched on Elon Musk, because that's a name that's come up quite frequently in all of this. To what extent do you think individuals like Elon Musk, who have personal ties to South Africa, but also have a close association to Trump, affect US foreign policy decisions towards South Africa?
Elon Musk is an interesting individual, because we've always known that there's a president, and when the president comes into power, the president will have a spouse that will be the first lady. We now have a first friend in Elon Musk. He leaves South Africa having benefited from apartheid. He is there because the apartheid, the process of apartheid gave him the privilege that he had to be able to go to the US, start the tech companies that he started, and then have access to Trump's ear. He is now controlling the direction that America is going. It is in Trump's nature to do that. I mean, when he was booted off Twitter at some point, he went and created his own Twitter. So he listens to those that control the narrative. And what is problematic is that Trump's close proximity Elon Musk's close proximity to Trump comes at a time when we know that the so-called minority in South Africa will be whispering to Elon Musk, who will then weaponize that and take it to Trump. Don't forget that not so long ago, Elon Musk was in South Africa trying to peddle ways for his Starlink to enter the economy here. We don't know how those turned out. We know that if he's to set up his Starlink in South Africa, our BEE laws would come in. He's probably not happy with that. And therefore, he then aligns with the so-called minority that's going around the world claiming that there's white genocide, weaponizing Trump, and activating a foreign government to try and disempower a duly elected South African government.
This concept you've raised of a first friend is quite an interesting one. I guess that gives us all an opportunity maybe to line up as a first friend to a leader somewhere. Moving on to economic and trade considerations. There's obviously differing views around the impact that the aid suspension may or may not have on South Africa, especially in terms of the HIV/AIDS programs. What do you see as being the immediate and long-term effects of President Trump's suspension of aid to South Africa?
First of all, we need to drill this down to the bare bones of the finances involved here, the statistics involved, the percentages involved. The aid that goes into HIV and so forth is less than 20%. It's very minuscule. But it is being blown out of proportion as if we're losing everything under the sun. It's this mentality of relying on the West that has gripped our people for so long. We need to disabuse them of that notion. Secondly, if one looks at AGOA, for instance, which is being thrown around as the stick in this stick and carrot game, AGOA, if you look back 25 years or so ago from now, our exports, let's take automotive industry, for instance, our exports to the US was just about 2 billion or so. And then 10 years later, it has risen to about 8 billion. But by 2023, the rise was no longer there. It had actually declined. 10 years ago, we were sitting at about 20% of our automotive exports going to the US. But a year ago, we were sitting at about 10%, which shows a decline. So if you look at this thing over the years, you realize that we're being threatened with something that might not necessarily exist. But here's the crunch. If you are to take away the US preferential trading system right now away from South Africa, the losses would not exceed 2%.
Is that on AGOA or on foreign trade or
on AGOA?
On AGOA.
On AGOA. But also if you back up that by understanding that the EU is actually happy with South Africa. The president of the EU Council called Ramaphosa not so long ago and said, I'm happy with the way things are going in South Africa and we're going to increase our trading with you. And if we then throw in BRICS into that and we say the global south starts trading alone, we de-dollarize, we can create new markets. We can actually make a sustainable system for ourselves without having to beg unstable Trump for his economy.
What is your assessment of the response from South Africa's political leaders and parties responding to the US's criticisms and policy decisions? And what do you think it says or indicates about South Africa's potential future foreign policy decisions?
Look, if South Africa sticks with its values as contained in the Constitution, that is the value of Ubuntu, which is contained in our jurisprudence, and the other values of respecting the Bill of Rights and human rights in general. We need to continue as a republic to defend the defenseless, such as the people of Palestine and others who are persecuted across the globe. If there are implications and consequences for that, we need to be able to stand up and find ways of mitigating that. The way that political parties have responded has been very, very ambivalent. Some are in support, some are actually taking the line that has been taken by AfriForum and the so-called minority. It shows you that politics may not necessarily be the solution for what we're trying to do here as a country. Our ethos as a republic are clear, but when we try to stand by those ethos, we find that the political representatives that we send to parliament tend to differ. The DA is in court right now challenging the Expropriation Act. I commend them for doing that. That's what AfriForum should have considered instead of weaponizing a foreign power to try and topple and destabilize the government here in South Africa. So DA is in court right now challenging the act. AfriForum is now busy saying that we shouldn't be blaming them, we should blame the ANC. It can't be when you go around the world denying that apartheid existed or that it was a crime against humanity. You can't be that when you take that and you create fake news and you say that there's something called farm murders. There's no such concept in criminal law. There's no farm. If I kill someone in this studio, it does not become a studio murder. It's just murder. So there's nothing called a farm murder, but yet they weaponize that and they go to Trump who's never been to South Africa, by the way, who's never been to Africa, by the way. I doubt he even has a passport. But they go to him and they tell him that things are happening in South Africa and the black people are responsible for killing white people. When we have women in Limpopo who are killed by white farmers, thrown into pigs. When we have the Koga brothers in Piet Retief who are shot by white farmers, killed just for existing, just for walking on the land on which they were born. And then you say that you're a minority. Simply by being a numerical minority does not make you vulnerable. They may be numerically inferior, but they're not economically inferior. They still control policy. They control the monetary direction of this country.
Angelo, this is definitely an interesting topic that almost all South Africans have some kind of viewpoint on, but we'll need to hold it there for now. Thank you once again for taking the time to come chat to us in studio. That was Angelo Dube, Acting Director at the School of Law at UNISA.